You're listening to The Journey with Ellie and Erin. Join us every week as we talk about all the things woo, wise and wonderful with our guests and have the bigger, braver, bolder conversations that women should be having so that we can be the change the world needs. Welcome to another episode of The Journey with Ellie and Erin. As always, I'm Erin and you're Ellie, right?
I think I still am. Yeah, no, we'll definitely go with that. I am for now.
Awesome. How are you doing, Ellie? How's your week been?
Man, it's been busy. All of those things that I didn't do during school holidays have now basically had to be done around like going to school and fixing all of that sort of stuff up. So it's been a pretty busy day. We're recording this on a Friday and yeah, I feel kind of ready for a long weekend, which, we've got, which I never remember because we don't have Labour Day in the UK as one of our bank holidays. So it's like, what is this day off we've got randomly in October? So, actually quite grateful for it.
Here in New Zealand, we don't even have bank holidays because what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
So,
fair point.
So, but hooray for a long weekend.
Yeah.
It always frustrates me when they have a long weekend a week into the school term. I'm like, of all the time that we need a break, that's probably not it. But I feel your pain around being really busy this week. Like it's, our children are going through, we've got an athletics day coming up next week. So they're really, really busy and they're really physical and they are exhausted, which means that their behavior is exhausting. And
love that.
And, so it's been quite the week. And, to top it all off, you've been extremely busy. So I haven't seen your face very much at all this week, and that doesn't make me happy. So nice to see your face, friend.
Oh, you're so sweet.
And and I'm excited to share this episode of the journey this week. Last week
it was such a cool conversation. With Danielle. It was anyone listening, just really, if you've got kids, it will just help on so many levels. And if you don't, it will still help on so many levels. It was just a phenomenal conversation. Phenomenal. God, that's a harder word to say out loud than it is in your mind.
Yeah. Especially on a Friday.
Well, exactly. But
maybe that's a Monday word.
Yeah. We'll try that next time. But I think, I really loved her openness, her honesty, her sharing of her experience. And it really resonated a lot with where I'm at. And I like to try and think of the positive things about, the experiences I have with my children, because they can be slightly fraught. And we had another wake up last night. So having had a few good nights of sleep, we didn't last night, but I took the girls to jazz for the first time. So Phoebe hasn't been doing proper dance classes yet. She's always just, joins in with Emily every now and then, but normally she's not allowed to. So she was actually allowed to go into the class on her own and do her dancing. And oh my goodness, it was so cute. I mean, she was wild and vaguely listened and a severe lack of coordination, but just delightful to watch. And then Emily, who's gone up a level, she's not done jazz before, but she's at a slightly different level than she's not just at pre-primary. Just seeing her listen and follow instructions and do an amazing job. She suddenly looked nearer that 6-year-old. And it was just like, I just had a real moment that she's growing up and, all of that stuff. But, so I'm trying to remember all of those things when they don't go to fucking sleep and whinge about wanting ice cream and not eating anything else for dinner.
You bank those cute moments. They are necessary things.
They so are.
But I agree. Like the conversation with Danielle, it's not the first conversation I've had with her. And I just think what she does is incredible. And the wisdom that she has around not just parenting young people, but I guess honoring young people. Like I love the way that she comes to that process. A lot of parenting coaches that I've seen out in the world tend to sort of view it as we're the ones with the power, we're the ones that have to change everything and set up structures and all of those sorts of things. But actually it's much more collaborative than that. And I love that Danielle brings that perception to it and that perspective. So it was a really great conversation, and both of us obviously navigating different different age groups and different challenges. I have an 11-year-old boy who is going into that smelly, grunty, preteen grossness, and a 7 going on 8-year-old who is in that space of really big emotions all the time. And he's a Scorpio to top it off. So that just absolutely, exponentially changes the way that we experience that. And so, it's been really helpful, I think, to have that conversation and to go into it. So, let's play it and see what people think. Okay?
Share your thoughts. If something really resonated with you, then make sure you let us know, and we can continue to amplify the voices of incredible women who are making all the difference.
All right, so our guest today is an incredible person that I met a little while ago. I spoke on her podcast and had a lot of fun talking about all things parenting. And so today I'm happy to welcome Danielle Bettmann to our show. Danielle is a positive discipline certified parenting mentor for families with strong-willed kids aged 1 to 7, and she's the host of the Failing Motherhood podcast. She guides parents to cultivate cooperation, extend their patience, and get on the same page through a one-to-one relationship called Sanity Solutions, and teaches her unique Wholehearted Method in her VIP group coaching program called Wholeheartedly CALM. A teacher by trade and a coach by strength, her passion is to be a translator between adult and children, helping parents crack the code of their child's personality and find sanity and strategies. Oh my goodness, do I need you in my life? Thanks, Danielle, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Is slamming. Welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I am so good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, really good. Thanks. It's exceptionally early here in New Zealand. Well, it feels exceptionally early because we had daylight savings a little while back as well. So it feels like it's actually about 5 a.m. But
oh gosh, yeah, it's noon here. I just had lunch. I'm doing great.
Yeah, nice, rub it in. But it's also like well worth getting up and having this conversation because I'm excited to learn more about what you do, but also to have a chat with Ellie first and foremost, because I know Ellie, she experiences a lot of what I think you speak to. But I'd love to start first and foremost with just like what kind of guided you to where you're at? What was your sort of journey around that stuff? Because I know you were a teacher, but yes. I also know that you have your own children. So I'm guessing at some point the need to work with parents who have strong-willed children probably came from something in your life, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So the full backstory is like when I was 18 and you're supposed to have your whole life figured out, and know what you're going to be when you grow up. All I knew is that I loved working with kids, so I went into education. My degree is from birth through 3rd grade with a special ed minor, and so it's basically teaching any child in early childhood or elementary age. And I went through that and loved it. But I knew that elementary wasn't for me. I wanted to stay with the younger grades. So I ended up teaching Head Start, which in the United States is ages 3 to 5. And then I moved into early Head Start because I realized like the earliest you can intervene, the better for development. And so I got then a group of infants who were like 6 weeks to 8 months and then stayed with them for 3 years up until they graduated to preschool. And I loved that. However, a big part of what we did was some home visiting. And so I ended up moving from the classroom to a home visiting program that was a partnership with Early Steps to School Success through Save the Children. And that I did that because I realized what happens in the classroom is great, but what happens at home is what really is really wiring these kids. And the parents are doing the hardest work, the very best they can, with no training, no village, no support to speak of, barely. And so I realized that like the 24-hour back end of what's going on at home is 10 times more influential than what I can do in 6 hours at school. So when I was home visiting, I absolutely loved it because the parents I was working with, like, basically brought me in as like part of their family, and they always looked forward to it and made the most of our time. And I brought books and activities we could do with their kids, but it was mostly parenting support. It was helping them connect with resources, doing developmental screenings, and just helping support their sanity and their well-being as parents. And so then closely soon after I had my kids, I have 2 girls. They are 15 months apart, which I don't professionally recommend. But after a while, the blur wears off and it starts to pay off. And so I wouldn't have it any other way now. But my second daughter was the one who really challenged everything that I thought I knew about child development and how kids learn best. Because my first was like that kiddo that just is by the book. You know, you tell her what to do. She wants to do well for you, doesn't want to get in trouble, and is pretty much, motivated by anything you'll throw by her. And my second was like, absolutely not. I will question everything. There is no status quo. No bribe, no threat, no punishment will change her mind. She knows what she wants and she's going after it. And she has high highs and low lows and no in between emotionally. And she is just a force to be reckoned with. And then I wanted to like apologize to every parent I had ever worked with up until then, because I was shocked they listened to a word I had to say when, like, classroom teacher experience is one thing. Parenting is a completely different field. Talk to any teacher who feels like they have, the behavior management of like a 30 child classroom. They go home and they struggle way more with their 2 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids. And so as I was talking to a lot of other friends and things, I was figuring out a lot more, but I still didn't discover Instagram. I didn't know that there was like whole parenting accounts or like influencers or any of that, because I was still in the Facebook era. I'm very slow to social media. I still don't have Twitter. And so I didn't even know what there was for like parenting support out there. I didn't know what label I would call myself as a parent. I didn't know like that there was attachment parenting, responsive parenting, positive, gentle, any of things like that. I was just figuring out kind of what worked for her. And it was a lot of communication based, strategies that made me really work on myself and my, emotion regulation and things. And so eventually I ended up got let go of my last job that I was doing part-time and really just wanted to work with parents again. So I just made it up and I did some in-home consultations with families locally, and I started doing some workshops at places like the local breastfeeding place and a workout gym, and just kind of figuring it out as I went, because I don't have an MBA. I don't know what I'm doing. And so eventually I took like a business course and the pandemic hit. So I switched all to virtual and I started working with families kind of all over the place on Zoom. And I started my podcast right kind of after the pandemic hit called Failing Motherhood. And I started to realize that like the families that are finding me are the ones with kiddos just like Annie. And so these are the strong-willed brew. And then I finally got a business coach and kind of figured out what I do and created my portal and my packages and my services. And it's been kind of a wild ride of entrepreneurship the whole time.
I have to say, there is a big part of me that says, thank goodness I'm not on my own with having a number 2 daughter who is basically, as you described, Annie, my Phoebe is exactly the same as that. She is 100%. A force to be reckoned with. I mean, it's incredible how this little 3-year-old can just... Man, I mean, they're both very strong-willed. As I sort of mentioned before we started recording, my mum did say to me I would get the daughters that I deserve, and I think that means the strong-willed, slightly bloody-minded, knows what they want, is going to go after it, because it's a little bit like me. But having 2 daughters like that is, wow, it's huge. And I came to motherhood quite late in life. It was never something that was particularly on my agenda, if I'm completely honest. I never really saw it as necessarily part of my future. And then I met my now husband, and it kind of just happened really easily, and it was just clearly meant to be. But I have to say that the challenge of becoming a mum has been the biggest one I have faced in my life without a shadow of a doubt. Nobody tells you the reality of what being a parent is. And
No.
I do believe there are people who have children and there are people who don't, and you just don't get it. Unfortunately, it's a completely different reality. Amazing in so many ways, but geez, it's hard. It's so hard. And like you say, with having two daughters, and it'll be interesting to hear from Erin with her boys. But when I had Emily is, again, like your number one daughter, very happy to do what, told me the other day. She really likes following the rules, which at the same time challenged me massively, because I was like, well, I don't want you to be a rule follower. Except when I tell you what to do, then I really do. So it was a real difficult one. But she's all about, doing the things and being, she's incredibly emotionally aware, and that just blows my mind. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how emotionally aware kids are in this day and age compared to what we were like. But then when Phoebe came along, I kind of, for some reason, even though I'm one of three girls, I thought, oh well, she'll just be the same as Emily, it'll be fine. And then sort of she came along, and almost from day one was different. But as she sort of like hit that 1 to 18 months, oh my goodness, this like firecracker personality came through, and I was just like, wow, how can two of the same lot of genes create such two completely different children? So any tips you've got on dealing with, both of them are strong-willed in their own way, but the one, she's just, is happy to just lie on the floor and shout until she gets her own way or doesn't get it, and will get over it. But it's just fascinating, like absolutely fascinating, the difference between two children, and the amount of people I speak to who talk about their second child being this sort of slightly more, I don't know what the best word to describe it. It's just, they're just so gorgeously
stubborn.
Wonderful in many ways, but stubborn and just bloody minded as well. I think I'll just tell one little story about that sums up the difference between the two of them. So we have, actually in New Zealand, it's not called a jammy dodger. In England, it's called a jammy dodger. In New Zealand, it's called a Shrewsbury. So it's a biscuit with jam and then another biscuit on the top. So my girls love them. They're allowed them every now and then. And Emily came in and said, oh, please, can I have a jammy dodger? And I said, no, I haven't got any. Completely lying, which I'm sure we're not meant to do as parents, but I thought I can't be bothered to, have the fight about biscuits now and dinner later. So no, I haven't got any. So quite happily she said, okay, fine. Went back to the playroom, carried on watching her programme. 2 minutes later, Phoebe comes in. Can I have a jammy dodger? I said, no, I haven't got any. So what this child does is she goes to the pantry. She uses the shelves to climb up. She finds the packet of jammy dodgers and she's like, here they are, mummy. And just helps herself. Takes one does take one for her sister, which, I'll give her credit for that. But it was just the difference between the two of them. Was just, one just accepted it. The other was like, no chance. I know there is something in here. And if it's not that I'll find something else that I want.
That is such a good example.
If it helps, boys aren't different. Boys are not different. Our number two is hands down exactly the same. So it's not a girl thing.
Yeah.
It's just
I really thought it was second kids overall, but like half the parents I poll and half the parents I work with, it's their first. And then their second is like super happy-go-lucky and chill. So never know what lottery you're going to get.
I don't know which way round would be easier, actually. Like, I think, if you get lulled into a false sense of security with your first one, and then the second one comes and bites you on the arse. I mean, I honestly, or do you just like plan for it and then you get a cruisy one? I don't know which one would be. Would be easier.
If it had been our first, we just wouldn't have had more children. We would have just had one. So, I think the fact that it's our second winner, I think Luca is very keen to be the youngest forever, and well done him. He succeeded. Because
I knew with mine that she could not handle like losing that baby status. So I was like, we're done at 2. Because it's only getting worse if a third comes and then she's like knocked from that pedestal. I don't want to see what that happens.
We have 2 hands. That's what my niece very gut said. She's like, someone said to her, "Is Mummy going to have any more babies?" She said, "No, she's got 2 hands and 2 children." So it's just like, I just kind of
that math checks out.
Yeah, I know. We're not outnumbered.
Kid.
As one of 3, I was like, "Wow, Mum, what were you doing? You outnumbered yourself. Like the kids were in charge then."
Yeah,
but
it's hard enough as it is, like we said.
Oh man, totally. But in terms of, there's a lot of talk nowadays about the first 1,000 days of children and how important that is, the emotional regulation of actually not just them but the parents. What is your what is your learnings around that? What is the thing that you would say to somebody who is coming to you, like me, who has an incredibly powerfully emotional and stubborn daughter? Like, how do we deal with that when we're ourselves feeling frustrated? Because that's the challenge. It's how do we manage our own emotions so that we're not giving them our stuff. What's your advice and what's your recommendations around that type of thing? Like I said, this is totally me getting as many tips as possible.
I was going to say, like, this is the coaching session or radio show.
Yes. No, it's so true. Like the first 1,000 days, the first 5-6 years, they are the most influential, the most important. The compound interest of those years pay off the entire rest of their life. It's like they're downloading the software. They're going to run on autopilot the whole rest of their life. They're forming their understanding of who they are and how they get their needs met and what their worldview is. And it's really, really core, foundational, fundamental things that are mostly learned in interaction between their caregiver and them in that secure attachment relationship. And it's so important that that happens within a space where the caregiver has a healthy sense of well-being and mental health. And because that's the only way that they have something to give and to overflow that and meet the needs, especially the co-regulation needs that that child needs at that time, because they are completely dependent on that caregiver, not only physically for sleep and food, but emotionally as well. But this is something that we have so much work to do, especially in the United States. Like, we have not really embrace this whatsoever. Actually, most of our services and our policies are pretty backwards, I would say, for being able to understand how this science works. So I know other countries are better in being able to give parental leave and, support families during these years and do more practical things just to be able to give families a leg up during this time period. But for the most part, like, that's why I recommend, I'm a voice for a parent's mental health so much on my podcast, because the demands and the expectations and the conflicting opinions and the pressure that caregivers face is unprecedented, I think, with the power of the internet. We just have too much information and too many voices and too much comparison and too many influencers we want to live up to and just all of the things, so that we feel like we're failing. Hence the term of my podcast, Failing Motherhood. But every parent is equipped to be able to be the parent for their child, but it doesn't come pre-installed. It is not like we reach a level of full enlightenment as a Yoda and then we unlock the power to have kids and then just bestow all this knowledge. It's actually like kids unlock the journey to all of this unlearning and awakening and like matrescence and all of these things that parenting has to offer. So it's a lot to juggle unlearning, learning, and teaching all at the same time, while the most sleep deprived, not seeing the light of day, all of these things against us as parents. So to feel like they feel guilt for taking care of themselves or for showering when their kid cries or for, taking a trip without their kid overnight, like that's the best thing that they can do. They have to be able to get a break or do something just for them or be able to feel like a person so that they can come back refreshed. They can have the privilege of missing their child and then feel rejuvenated enough to keep giving again. So it's a very, very high pressure, fragile balance, I feel like, that, we all feel like we're swinging on a pendulum from time to time.
Yeah, and I think what I found really interesting is how much of my parenting is so installed in me based on how I was parented. Like,
oh, yes.
Considering, if you think about it, from a logical adult mind, it's like, well, I was really young, so how would that have really, I don't remember much before I was sort of like 5-ish, a few sort of vague memories. So, but yet
Right.
it's so clear that the way that I was parented is my natural go-to. So it's almost like what we're having to learn at the moment is not just how to parent in the modern day when, there is all of this added pressure, but
Right.
it's also realizing how much we carry through generationally. And it's probably, if we're so obviously connected to how our parents parented us, then they were connected to their parents and so on. And it feels like it's been carrying on for such a long time that it's now this opportunity to change it. And yet it's a huge responsibility because we don't like you say, you don't get parenting lessons. You don't get your degree and then like, now you may go and have a baby. It's like, it just happens. And then they let you leave the hospital with it. I remember thinking as we were sort of packing up and like working out the car seat, thinking, how are we, like, when are the grown-ups going to come and help us with this? Like, how are we allowed to just take this baby home?
Yeah.
Like, it's nuts.
And
yet we're meant to just go home and know how to deal with it. And like you say, it's one of the most stressful times as on the mum, but also on a relationship as well. When you're not sleeping, when you're dealing with everything new and trying to get your head around what it is. I mean, even just thinking about it takes me back to sort of slight anxiousness around it.
Oh, yeah.
It's really, what should
How
we...
did they let you take a baby home?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, like, they've let me have 2.
What were they thinking? Yeah, craziness.
Turns out like having a dog really helped, it's sort of, feed them regularly.
yeah. Change the diapers.
But, yeah, put them in the cage. No, I'm just kidding. I'm genuinely kidding. But it's that whole, like, how do we start to change the systems? Like, it's a systemic change that is needed in terms of valuing I guess it's changing the value of the mother. Like, we've always been seen as the natural caregiver and the nurturer and that role. But within that, we've been expected to take everything on and be everything to all people. So how do we kind of break it down and rebuild it? What should we be what should we be trying to rebuild within, the work that we're doing?
Yeah. I like the idea that parenting is called parenting and not childing, because it's so much more about the parent than it is about the child. But I really feel like it's true. I was listening to a business podcast the other day, and they were talking about how you need to think about taking care of yourself in a business sense, like you are the asset. Like without you, the business doesn't run. You don't have like the, mind. You don't have your ability to make money. And so you have to protect yourself and take care of yourself like you are, let's say, the president of a company or even the president of, your country. And, that you have Secret Service and you have all these things to support protecting the asset. And I love to bring that idea home to think about like, your ability to parent relies solely on your ability to parent. Like, you are the thing that does the parenting. And so often we just take our abilities for granted, running them into the ground and just saying like, I can sacrifice everything. You don't have to spend money on me. You don't have to do things for me. I don't have to, like, it's just all for my kids. But really, you're doing your kids a huge disservice by not being able to give them a well-equipped, patient parent with capacity to meet their needs and to, prevent them or eliminate them in the first place. And so it really is a big mindset shift in how we see ourselves and then how society sees us and values us as well. Because it's kind of like that whole idea of you teach people how to treat you. We've all just kind of agreed, like, yeah, the unpaid labor of women or mothers is, kind of the status quo. And so we'll take that and we'll do our job. And, if our kids are successful, then that's all the reward we need. And it's like, no, that's not actually the best way to set this up. And that's not how that works.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Erin, I really want your thoughts in a second, because I know I'm asking many, many questions here. But I think what I found really interesting recently is Emily's 5.5 and Phoebe's will turn 3 in June. And I feel since she turned 3, like it's kind of like a shift in me. I've suddenly realized how much I need me back again. It was kind of, I was okay to almost put me as sort of number 2 for a wee while, but actually that's come back up. And I've actually found that quite challenging to deal with, in the fact that I now know that I have to do these things for me. It feels quite selfish almost. How do we help mothers change that mindset? I mean, I know we say that we've got to look after ourselves first, but it doesn't come naturally, I don't think. So
I mean, they come into our program, like they come and work with us, Ellie. That's what they do.
Good point. Good reminder. But it's interesting, isn't it, when you think about how, like, it's easy to say you've got to put yourself first. It's like that whole put your life mask on first. But the reality of doing it when you're dealing with the emotions and the feelings that go with it is really hard.
It is. It's so against your instinct, and it's so hard because you feel like your child is your barometer. So if they're happy, you're doing the right thing. If they are unhappy, you're doing the wrong thing. And so we feel that like gut tearing us apart, where it's like, oh no, like I can't possibly be doing the right thing if it's making my child unhappy, or if it's, you know, not giving them something that they are asking for or wanting. And the reality is our child has every opportunity to ask for the things that they want, but we act out of their best interest as their parent. And we know, you know, every ask for a dessert is not something that we should give in to, because it's not what's actually best for them. In the same way, we have to be able to sit in that really uncomfortable disconnect between, I know this is the right thing to do, and it's going to make my child disappointed, or you know, frustrated, or just sad because I'm going to step away, or I'm going to, you know, go over to my friend's house.
Well, they're going to tell
whatever
you
it is.
I'm not your best friend anymore. That's the one we get from Emily. It's just like,
pulling out the big guns.
Brutal. Yes. Yeah, I know. She knows how to do it.
You're not coming to my party.
You're not coming to my party. I'm like, on the basis I'm organising it, I think I will be.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions about your own experience with this, I guess. Like, a lot of what I do is about generational stuff. And while I've been listening to you talk with Ellie, and listening to Ellie talk as well, what comes up for me is that I wonder how much our experience of parenting differs from our mother's experience. Because I heard you say something around, like, you know, we have to put ourselves first, and all of that stuff. And, you know, if our child is happy, we're doing the right thing. And if our child is unhappy, we're doing the wrong thing. Like, that's the kind of mindset that we're in. Do you think that our mothers had that mindset? Or do you think that they were much more of a, I'm going to tick the boxes, and if my child goes to school with a lunchbox and fully clothed, I've won? And, you know, like, do you think that there is a shift around how much pressure we put on ourselves to make our children happy?
Yeah, I really think the emotional needs of humans in general were relatively untapped or unheard of or unaddressed, I think. And that's a blanket statement. But speaking to my own experience, I think that there was a big focus on, the physical needs. Are they showing up to school with a lunchbox? Are they, you know, making a bad reputation of our family to the neighbors? You know, are they in the news? If none of those things are true, then we're doing a relatively good job. Like, as long as, you know, we maybe even make them do some chores like that, we're really good parents. There wasn't a whole lot of boxes to tick, I think, because otherwise it's like, what else are we looking for? What else are we supposed to be doing? And I think again, if they're parenting the way that their parents parented them, there wasn't maybe even the capacity to understand they had emotional needs either. So they're emotionally stunted or immature, and then, you know, kind of just repeating that cycle. And so if they didn't even understand the concept of mental health, I'm sure it's very hard to then even see that in a person who doesn't even feel fully human, you know, that you're kind of bossing around. And so I think there was a lot less comparison, a lot less a lot less knowledge of just what are we supposed to be doing, so that in one hand, they felt like they were doing a relatively good job, which is okay, but then probably missing a whole lot as well and not realizing it. But I think that the focus on emotional needs and mental health is obviously needed for our generation, but I think just the downfall comes when we have so much pressure and understanding of that it takes us right back down, because we don't know if it's just another thing that we're failing at, or we don't know what that looks like to do it well, and it becomes very ambiguous. And so, again, we don't have boxes to tick that make us feel good, like we're doing something of worth, because it's a lot more like, well, I'm just going to put in the time now and hope that in 18 years it did something helpful. I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because you talked about a pendulum before, and I think that's kind of where we've gone, right? Like we've almost gone to the extreme of worrying about the emotional well-being of our children. And, you know, I think it will course correct at some point and come back down to sort of a more happy balance, I think. But, yeah, it's really interesting for me, like seeing, you know, I reflect a lot myself and my parenting journey, because my parenting journey is not the norm, I would say. I don't look at my children and see myself in them, because they're not biologically my children. But I look at them and I see my wife and I'm like, damn it, damn it, why did we do it? But I think, like, I reflect a lot on my own parenting, you know, as a child, like what I remember of my parenting. And the thing that stands out for me the most, and I wonder if this is part of the shift that we're seeing, is that as a child, I wasn't parented by my parents. I was parented by my grandparents, by my older cousins, by my aunties. Like it was a village raising us as children. And I grew up with my cousins being like siblings. And, you know, it was very much a very different experience to the one that I have with my children, where my parents live in, you know, a different island. Like we don't see them, we see them maybe once every 2 years. And I know Ellie is much the same. Like she's on the other side of the world. We don't have a lot of, we don't have access to grandparents, and aunties and older cousins and those sorts of things in the way that we did. And so it feels like we've kind of just loaded ourselves up with all of the work. And I think a lot of parents will feel that way because of, you know, we've moved away for work, or, you know, we've married someone that we met at college, and so we have to choose where we live and those sorts of things. And it's really interesting because I don't think our parents were unaware that we had emotional needs. I just think they were taken care of by other people. Right? Like I don't think our parents... Sorry.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think in the situation where you had lots of extended family around you, is, I mean, probably more normal then than it is now. But we didn't. I mean, my aunts and uncles didn't live particularly locally. We had grandparents who would drip in and out, but my parents were still predominantly the caregivers to me and my sisters. And I think the awareness of emotional needs, I think, has changed in time. I think the fact that we now, you know, understand a lot more about emotional language, we're encouraging children to say how they feel. We're encouraging them to actually vocalize how they feel in a situation, rather than being like, oh, you know, just go and give Uncle so-and-so a kiss, even though it feels really uncomfortable and awkward for you. We're teaching them body autonomy. We're teaching them to feel, to be okay with saying no to stuff that certainly as a child, it was just expected that you behaved in a certain way. And I think that's quite a big difference. And I think that does come down to a change in emotional awareness. And even now, when I, you know, talk to my mum, you know, her thing is, oh, I don't do deep, darling, you know. And so she doesn't want to have those deep conversations, and that's totally fine. She's where she is, and I meet her where she is. But I think it's very interesting how much we've progressed in terms of our generation. And even when Emily can stand and tell me how she's feeling, and she knows the emotion that is coming forward for her, that's huge. Like my husband struggles with that sometimes. So I love what you say, Erin, in terms of like that family, that village that it takes to bring up. And what we've created down here in Christchurch is we've created that through friends, because we don't have family here, and actually a lot of my friends don't. So we've kind of created that space for each other, that actually the girls do have other adults that they can have a relationship with, that they know that they can trust and that they can go to. And that's what I want, is that when they're a teenager and they can't tell me what's going on because I'm their mother, and I'll obviously be the worst person on the planet at that stage, because I remember thinking that about mine, that there are other adults that they can talk to who are, you know, the same sort of emotionally aware and doing the same sort of stuff. And I think that's what's different now, is that I think we're probably a little bit more selective about those people that we bring into our kids' lives, and they're there more for what they bring rather than just because they're there. I certainly know I'm quite selective about those people, but I think that's important. So yeah, it's interesting, the different experiences, and it might be because, you know, I grew up in the UK and you grew up over here, Erin. So, but I think emotionally, I think we're much more aware than our parents probably still aren't even now.
Do you think though that we've gone too far with that at the moment? Like that we are so overly cautious around making sure that they have the full range of emotional tools and all of that sort of thing, that we're kind of almost asking them to grow up emotionally a little faster than they're generally prepped for. Like if we're talking about that pendulum, I do wonder if sometimes we are creating emotional beings that are ill-equipped, because, you know, we know they don't have logical minds, right? We know that they don't have that fully functional, whatever the hell it is that you keep telling me about in the brain. Like, does that
prefrontal cortex? Yes.
Thank you. I knew someone would know it. But, you know, like, I think because they don't have that, like, have we gone too far in creating these emotional toolkits for these children that they don't actually have the logical connection to be able to apply them accurately in all situations? Or have we just equipped them for success in a way that we weren't, and we're, you know, doing perfectly well? I'd be really interested. I know, Ellie, you probably like, yeah, no, we're doing the right thing. But like, what are your thoughts on that, Danielle? Because I think for me, like, I have a super emotional second child. His emotions are massive. He's a Scorpio, so his emotions like hit the room about 3 minutes before he does. And like, I think some of the tools that we've given him have been really good. Some of them have made him more aware of his emotions than are helpful sometimes, I think. So I'm interested in what you think there.
Yeah. I think that we're still trying to find exactly where that line is, because there are definitely some things strategy-wise that I feel like do more for the parent than for the child. Like, let's say the whole calm down corner with like 1,000 posters on the wall and like, you know, all these fidget toys and just like a whole bunch of stuff, where I think that makes a parent feel like they are doing something when they can hit add to cart. And in all, you know, actuality, when a child's full of big emotions, they won't be able to have the capacity to go through a lot of those tools. It's just not the time. They're going through a tunnel. You know, like, there are definitely hows and not just, you know, what's of like naming. Like, I think we can kind of run with something like naming emotions and then end up making a mess of it, because we're trying to ask a child who's like screaming, oh, I know you're feeling really frustrated. You, and then they're just like, I am not frustrated. You know, where it like makes it worse, because they're like, you're telling me what to do, but that's not what we're trying to do. So I think that there's so much value in being able to empower them, that it's something that's very instinctual. I think kids are more in tune with their emotions than we are as we get older, because their instincts aren't like, you know, messed up, I guess, by society yet. And so what feels very real and true to them, if we can speak to them and kind of meet them there really well, we can make sense of that for them in a way that's very empowering. and then be able to give them tools like, oh, you can't actually believe everything you think. And here are ways to kind of choose your thoughts, or, when you're feeling this way, here's what to do. And it's not that they can always act upon that, because I think, we a lot of times if we teach them something, then we're like, okay, we talked about it. We can expect that out of them now 100% of the time. And it's like, well, they still might understand that concept, but not developmentally have the impulse control or the, thinking ability to kind of connect the dots and predict what's going to happen. So they change their reaction before it can happen again. There are still a lot of thinking, abilities that are still forming up until like age 24. So the information about emotional awareness has to be paired then with their ability to, take action on it. But I think the biggest disconnect is still a parenting generation that wasn't parented with emotional awareness, trying to teach it to their kids, because we're still in a very emotion phobic society. If we all just felt super comfortable with someone else bawling on our couch, then that would be a different thing of how we actually felt like we can handle our kids. But in all reality, emotions still make us very uncomfortable. So we're looking for fixes, and a lot of times too quick of fixes, so that we can get them to just move on and get better so that we can feel better. And there's still a lot of work to do with just the overall understanding of emotions are okay. They can have them, and that doesn't mean that we're doing a bad job or that anything has gone wrong, but that's still so hard. We just want to be okay, is everybody happy? Is everybody happy now? Okay, great. Yay.
Yeah, that's so true. I think just to respond again to Taryn, because I think as much as they may not be able to have the capacity to necessarily process exactly how to use the information that they're learning, it's creating that foundation there. It's like that whole thing, they'll take from every conversation what they're capable of taking from it. They'll, whatever, you can tell them stuff, they will take the age related stuff that they can. So as long as that message is the same going through, they'll just keep picking up, and by the time they're in their 40s, they won't be doing the emotional work that a lot of people are doing, because they'll have actually learned to access them. And I think that's the key, is we weren't taught to access them, we weren't taught to value them, we weren't taught, if anything, it was good emotions are good, bad emotions are bad, therefore we don't want them, so hide them, push them down, certainly don't show them to anybody, keep them well out of the way. And I think actually learning that emotions, they're not good, they're not bad, they are emotions, they're feelings, and they're data points for us. Actually, when you can start to feel them and allow them to flow through, you can use them for information. And I think that's what the kids of today are going to be much, much better at, doing that at a much earlier point than certainly I was able to. I am very aware of time, and we could continue this conversation probably for another good couple of hours, and I've still got many questions for you, so we'll stay in touch. But Erin, are you going to go in with your 5 from 5, the questions, because I love this part.
Yeah, why not? So it's not really 5 from 5 because there's 4 questions, but
oh, is that? I think it has 5. Yeah. My bad. 4 from 4.
Yeah. So the first question is, what book have you read that you wish you had written?
That I wish I had written.
Yeah.
Ooh. Let me look at my bookshelf. I just read and met, actually, Dr. Dana Suskind. She wrote Parent Nation, and it's all about empowering small little villages so that parents can be their own best advocates and create the society that our kids need. Moving on, and it's all of the research, all of the understanding that we need to be able to especially advocate politically. Super smart. She was really cool. She actually tweeted a picture with me, so I feel very, very biased.
Wow.
But I would have to say her book, Parent Nation.
Nice. Who are the 3 people, living or dead, that you would invite over for dinner?
Ooh. I did not have this prepared. Let's see.
I mean, that's kind of the point.
Okay.
And by the way,
have a bunch of dead air while I think.
Yeah.
We're coming to the meal at the dinner as well, because actually what we're finding is everyone's choosing. I'm like, oh, can I come to dinner as well? So the new rule is, who would you like to invite to have dinner with us as well as you?
Okay, that's fair. I would love to meet Maria Montessori. I feel like she was so before her time, and like her words have been so kind of just like taken into a million ways, and I would love to know like how she came to the conclusion she did at the time she did with the resources she did. So Maria Montessori and Magda Gerber is probably a similar person with like responsive infant care, and Shefali Chesbari I feel like is a huge thought leader in the parenting world. So those three.
Wow. Well, I know Ellie's all in on that dinner because she likes to try and understand her little people as best as she can.
Yes.
The next question is, what do you want your 90-year-old self to be able to say to your current self?
Thank you. I would love for her to be able to say, thank you for believing in us and continuing to put one step in front of the other, and investing in the opportunities when you could, and making the most of the years you've had with your little kids.
Nice.
That's a deep one.
Yeah, it is. And now for a less deep one, what is your guilty pleasure?
Reading fiction books where it's like a suspense thriller where like somebody's murdered at the beginning, and then you like keep trying to figure out almost like who did it at the end, and then it's like somebody you never expected. Oh, that's my favorite.
Yes,
love it.
We were friends for a reason. Love it. Well, I want to say thank you to you. I'm not your 90-year-old self, but thank you for the work that you do, and the wisdom that you bring to the world, as well as spending time with us here today, because I think the beautiful thing about what you do is that you really do embody that concept that Ellie talks about all the time of, I'm just going to carry my candle out into the world, and I'm going to light the candle of the next group of people, and then they're going to go and light their candles for the people around them. And it feels very much like that's what you do with your work. And, there's nothing more important to me than investing in the people who are raising our children and raising the next generation. So thank you for your time and for coming and spending time with us and sharing all of your beautiful wisdom. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. And
I'm sorry that Ellie's now going to badger you for days about
No, I love it. I love it. That's what I'm here to do.
Awesome.
No, it's been
You're my
awesome.
people.
Love the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you.